All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to decode India's economic blueprints, and we're going to do it by looking at just 1 week of new rules and official reports. And trust me, you'll be surprised what they reveal.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What can a handful of new rules, all released in just a single week, really tell us about the economic game plan for a nation of 1.4 billion people?
Sounds kind of crazy, right? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. So first up, let's talk about the engine room of the economy, fueling the growth engine. We're going to unpack the policies that are really designed to put the pedal to the metal on innovation and opportunity.
And wow, the scale here is just massive. I mean, think about this. After a decade of this Startup India initiative, we're talking about over 200,000 recognized startups. That's not just a number, that's an explosion.
But here's what's really fascinating. You might think all this action is happening in the big cities, right? Nope. It's a dead even split. 50% are in the major metros, sure, but the other 50%, they're popping up in smaller towns all across the country. This proves innovation isn't a big city monopoly anymore. And look, this is no accident. This growth is being actively cultivated. You've got these big government pushes, a focus on really advanced deep tech, schemes to empower tiny businesses in rural areas, and special attention on hot sectors like agritech and electric vehicles. It's a full-court press.
Okay, that's great, but it brings up a huge question, right? How do you actually connect all these brilliant innovators from small towns to the massive global market?
And this is the brilliant part. A seemingly tiny rule change is turning out to be an absolute game changer. I mean, the old way, it was a nightmare of complex paperwork, and the benefits really only went to the big established players. But the new way? You can file simple electronic forms right at the post office. And just like that, crucial export incentives are now open to everybody. This is just a massive, massive unlock for e-commerce and small businesses. Okay, so you've got your foot on the gas with all this growth, but how do you keep the car on the road? Well, that leads us to this delicate balancing act between pushing forward and maintaining stability. And a perfect example of this balancing act is something we can all relate to: food. To keep things stable at home, the government is being super careful about managing its food supply. Let's look at wheat flour, for instance. The policy here isn't just a simple yes or no on exports. It's more like a dimmer switch. Technically, exports are still restricted. But a small, limited quota is allowed, and only with very strict permission. Why? The whole point is to prevent those wild price swings that hit consumers right in the wallet. And you know, this focus on keeping prices stable isn't just about what's on your dinner table. Let's zoom out and look at the whole economy. This number right here, this is what policymakers are staring at. It's the wholesale inflation rate, and it came in at a pretty tame 0.83%. But what's the story behind that number? Well, it's a bit of a tug of war. You see, the cost of manufactured goods is actually creeping up, but that's being pulled down by a big drop in fuel and power prices. It's this kind of detail that helps the central bank figure out what to do next. And yeah, speaking of the central bank, the Reserve Bank of India is not just watching from the sidelines. It's actively in the game, managing how much cash is sloshing around in the system. They use these regular auctions to lend to banks, basically fine-tuning the economy to keep things steady and predictable. Okay, so we've talked about the engine and the balancing act. Now let's talk about the guardrails. We're going to look at new rules for banks, consumers, and companies, all designed to make the whole system stronger and safer. All right, to get this next part, we need to quickly break down a bit of jargon. It's called the Net Open Position, or NOP. Don't worry, it's simpler than it sounds. Basically, it's just a way to measure how much risk a bank is taking on from the crazy ups and downs of foreign currency exchange rates. Think of it as their bet on which way the market will move. So what's the change? Well, the central bank is proposing new rules to get everyone on the same page. The idea is to create one single method for all banks, get India in line with global standards, and ultimately just make them better at managing this specific kind of risk. And hey, this isn't just about fancy banking rules. For you and me, for everyday consumers, things are actually getting a lot simpler. Instead of a maze of different places to file a complaint, it's all being rolled into one single integrated system. That means getting help should be way faster and easier. And finally, let's talk about the big companies. The regulators are sending them a message, and it is crystal clear. This quote really says it all. Effective communication is not just a regulatory expectation, but a critical element of risk management. So what does that mean? The bottom line is regulators are drawing clear lines in the sand.
Auditors, you have your job. You need to report fraud, and you need to document everything. And the company's board? Your job is to make sure the internal systems are solid and the financial reports are telling the truth. They're separate jobs, but they are absolutely linked. Okay, we've looked at all these different pieces of the puzzle, the startups, the food policy, the banking rules. So what does it all add up to? Let's talk about the path forward and weigh the huge opportunities against the risks that are still out there. When you step back and look at everything from that one week, a really clear picture emerges. It's a dual strategy. On one side, you have this massive push for innovation and growth, but on the other, you have this very deliberate effort to strengthen the rules and controls. It's that classic balancing act, right? Pushing the accelerator hard while also making sure the brakes are stronger than ever. India is trying to do both at the same time. But of course, this is a high-wire act. It's not without risks. How will these new rules actually work in the real world? Could we see delays in getting these new systems up and running? And will companies actually comply? And then there's the big one, the question that's always there. Which way is inflation going to go next? And all of this really leaves us with one big, thought-provoking question. We see this constant push and pull between innovation and prudence, between moving fast and being careful. Can India's economic balancing act truly define its future? Because honestly, the answer to that question is what the future holds for over 1 billion people.